rule number 2. You guys ready? Rule number 2 is making a win-win whenever possible. So essentially, it's about putting your relationship first and refraining from the use of force. Okay. So in my work with the Mustangs and zebras, there's no way that you can force them to do anything. First of all, I'm not all that big, okay, doing this on my own. And second of all, the instincts are just so strong that if they're forced into something, they can develop a lot of trauma. And they just hold on to it, and it ends up taking way longer in the long run. Okay, so I had to figure out a way to make their idea my idea. And the way that I do that is by creating a win-win situation. Another way of saying it, which you guys have probably heard before if you've studied much horsemanship, is make the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard. Okay? So essentially, we want them to make the decision on their own to do what we kind of set out to do. Okay? So that, instead of saying lay down right now, it's saying, the horse is saying, I have a good idea. How about I lay down? Okay? So it's just a different kind of way of going about it. And you can kind of think about this in terms of magnets. So, for example, if you have a trailer, okay, you want your horse to load into the trailer. Naturally, this is something that is negative to your horse, and on the outside is a positive area, because horses, being prey animals, they're naturally claustrophobic. So being in here is like a death sentence. Being out here in the wide open is much safer, okay? Especially if there's other horses out here. So how would you reverse those magnets? Well, using this rule, you could have your horse work and expel energy out here, okay, so that this area becomes negative, and making the trailer a place of rest, so that they are drawn into the trailer by their own free will in that sense. And horses, being prey animals, are always going to reserve their energy for a time where they're going to need to get away from a predator. So yes, horses will come out, fresh and stuff like that, but and different breeds have different energy levels. But all of them have the same instinct as far as self-preservation goes, as prey animals, to reserve their energy, which is why this is effective. So that being said, making the win-win is about redirecting negative energy in a positive way. So, for example, if your horse is pawing, instead of, just shanking on them, hello, Kodiak, and kind of trying to get them to, trying to force them to stop pawing, versus as soon as they paw, say, okay, let's go lope circles, let's go do this, let's go do that, so that being tied isn't such a bad thing. You're redirecting that energy. And a lot of times what I see with horses is that we try to rein them in and hold them back when that energy begins to mount. And if you try to we're talking about redirecting energy. So if you try to keep holding that energy, it's going to explode, okay? So it's like kind of those geysers at Yellowstone. I heard this analogy. I think it works well here. I think they go off about every 10 minutes or so. They look really quiet and peaceful, but that energy is building and building, and it's getting ready for an explosion, okay? And that's when we see things like a rear and things like that, is when that energy just builds and builds and it's got to go somewhere. We can prevent that by simply redirecting it, making it a win-win. A reason that I think people struggle with making the win-win is because of micro management. We are kind of conditioned in our society not to make mistakes. Mistakes are bad, okay? So we try to do everything that we can to stop and prevent a mistake from happening. And the thing is that we've got to make mistakes if we're going to learn how to do something on our own. And it's the same way with horses. If you micromanage your horse, you're always going to have to micromanage them. And, your horse wants a job. And they don't want you to stand over their shoulder the whole time. They want to have the freedom of you asking them to do something, and they can do it without having to hold their hand the whole way. And so making the win-win is about embracing when they make a mistake. You're almost, in some instances, setting them up so that, hey, I'm almost tempting you to make a mistake, okay? So that they do learn to do it on their own.